Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a first-generation college student, which sounds fancy until you realize it just means I had no idea what I was doing and no family money to fall back on. My parents work blue-collar jobs and barely scrape by, so when I got accepted to the state university, I knew I was on my own financially. The partial scholarship helped, but it wasn't nearly enough. That's how I ended up working 40 hours a week at a local warehouse while taking a full course load. My days started at 5 a.m. when I'd drag myself to my job loading trucks. I'd work until 2 p.m., then rush to campus for afternoon and evening classes. By the time I got back to my dorm around 9 p.m., I was dead tired and starving. Most students could just order pizza or grab something from the dining hall, but I was counting every penny. Meal prepping was my lifeline. I shared a floor with about 20 other students, and we all used the same communal kitchen and fridge. I had my designated shelf clearly labeled with my name, where I'd store containers of food I'd made on weekends when I had time. Usually, I'd make big batches of pasta, rice dishes, or casseroles that could last me 3 or 4 days. The problem started about 2 months into the semester. I'd come home exhausted, ready to heat up my pre-made dinner, only to find my containers empty or completely missing. At first, I thought maybe I'd miscounted portions or forgotten I'd eaten something, but then it became obvious. I'd walk into the kitchen and find 3 girls who didn't even live on our floor sitting there eating my meals right in front of me. They'd found their way up from the second floor and apparently decided our kitchen was their personal restaurant. The first time I caught them, I tried to be polite about it. I pointed out that they were eating my food and that the container had my name on it. The blonde girl just shrugged and said she thought it was leftovers nobody wanted. When I explained that I had made it yesterday and really needed it for dinner, the brunette girl told me it was almost gone anyway, and that I should make more next time. I stood there speechless as they continued eating my chicken and rice while chatting about their sorority drama. The audacity was unreal. This became a regular thing. I'd ask them to stop, explain that I was working to pay for groceries, but they'd just shrug it off. The blonde one even had the nerve to give me cooking tips once, telling me I should add more garlic to my pasta sauce because it would taste way better. When I sarcastically said maybe she'd never know since she wouldn't be eating it anymore, the brunette girl rolled her eyes and told me not to be so dramatic because it was just food. Just food. Easy to say when your parents were paying for your meal plan and sending you care packages. After 3 weeks of this, I was surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and ramen noodles because I couldn't keep up with making food fast enough. I was losing weight I couldn't afford to lose, and my grades were starting to slip because I was constantly hungry and distracted. That's when I decided enough was enough. I went home that weekend and enlisted my mom's help. We made the most amazing spaghetti sauce you've ever seen, with perfectly seasoned meat that looked rich and delicious. I made enough to fill a huge serving bowl, knowing full well it would be gone by the time I got back from my Monday classes. Sure enough, I walked into the kitchen Monday evening to find all 3 girls standing around the counter with bowls of my spaghetti. The serving bowl was nearly empty. The blonde girl looked up at me with genuine excitement and told me how incredible the spaghetti was. She wanted to know what my secret was because this meat tasted so different from my usual stuff. This was my moment. I casually explained that it was a special recipe from my family's farm and that we got the meat fresh from our butcher. The brunette girl asked what kind of meat it was, commenting on its unique texture. I told them it was head cheese and that most people in the city didn't know about it, but it was really common where I came from. The red-haired girl looked confused and asked what head cheese was. I kept my expression completely neutral, like I was explaining the weather, and told them it was pig brains. I explained that my family had been making it for generations, and that you grind up the brains with some other parts to create this really rich, creamy texture. I said that's what gave it that distinctive taste they were enjoying. The blonde girl's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, Her face went from curious to confused to absolutely horrified in about 3 seconds. She asked me to confirm that I had said pig brains. I nodded and explained that it was fresh pig brains, and that's what made most of my meals so flavorful. I told them we used a lot of organ meat on the farm: brain, liver, intestines, because nothing goes to waste. The red-haired girl dropped her bowl immediately, and it shattered on the floor, spaghetti sauce splattering everywhere. The brunette girl was staring at her bowl like it had turned into a snake, but the blonde girl had the reaction. She made this horrible gagging sound and took off running toward the bathroom, but she didn't make it in time. She started puking right there in the hallway, leaving a trail of vomit all the way to the bathroom door. Once she got inside, I could hear her retching violently, while the other two girls screamed and ran out of the kitchen completely. The blonde girl spent the next 20 minutes in that bathroom, and from the sounds of it, she was bringing up everything she'd eaten for the past week. When she finally emerged, pale and shaky, she looked at me with pure hatred and told me I was disgusting. She demanded to know how I could not tell them what was in the food. I simply replied that they had never asked before. I pointed out that they just took my food and ate it, and I figured if they were going to steal my meals, they might as well know what farm-fresh ingredients taste like. She walked out without another word, and I never saw any of them in our kitchen again. I get easily distracted when there's movement or activity around me. It's just how my brain works. I've learned to manage it over the years by sitting in certain spots, using noise-canceling headphones when studying, and other little tricks. In my advanced psychology class, we had a deaf student who sat in the front row with his sign language interpreter. The interpreter would sit right next to him and translate everything the professor said. I completely support accessibility and accommodations for disabled students. Everyone deserves equal access to education. But the constant movement of the interpreter's hands was really distracting for me. I sat a few rows behind them, and my eyes would naturally drift to the signing during lectures. It made it hard for me to concentrate on what the professor was saying. I never complained to anyone official about it, never brought it up in class, and never said anything that could hurt the deaf student's feelings. The only person I ever mentioned this to was my friend. We were grabbing coffee after class one day, and I was feeling frustrated because I'd missed some important points during the lecture. I told her I was having such a hard time focusing in psychology class. She asked why, since Professor Johnson was pretty engaging. I explained that it wasn't about the professor. I told her I wished the deaf student and his interpreter sat in the back of class so it wouldn't be so distracting for the rest of us. She just said, "Oh," and seemed to think about it. I clarified that I understood he needed accommodations and wasn't against that at all, but that I just struggled with the visual distraction. She nodded and changed the subject. I was just venting to someone I trusted about my own personal struggle with focus. I wasn't attacking the student or saying he didn't deserve help, but my friend had other plans. The next class, I walked in and took my usual seat. About 10 minutes into the lecture, the deaf student suddenly stood up and turned around to face the class. His interpreter stood up too, looking uncomfortable. The deaf student asked Professor Johnson to excuse him because he needed to address something. The professor stopped mid-sentence and looked confused, telling him of course he could speak and asking what was wrong. The deaf student looked directly at me, and I felt my stomach drop. He asked me if I had a problem with his accommodations. He was looking right at me. The whole class turned to stare. I felt my face burning red. I asked him what he meant, completely confused. He told me that his friend had told him that I thought he should sit in the back so he wouldn't distract people. He wanted to know if I had a problem with him having an interpreter. My so-called friend had completely twisted what I said and told him about our private conversation. I told him no, that wasn't what I meant at all. I explained that I didn't have a problem with him having an interpreter and that I supported his right to accommodations. But he asked why I had said they should sit in the back. I tried to explain that I was just struggling with distraction personally. I told him it wasn't about him specifically, but about my own focus issues. But he was getting more upset. The interpreter was signing frantically, and I could see other students whispering and shaking their heads at me. He told me I was being ableist. He said I had no right to make him feel like a burden for existing. And then something happened that made the whole situation even more intense. He said that last part using his voice instead of his interpreter. His speech was a bit unclear, but everyone understood exactly what he was saying. The classroom went completely silent except for a few gasps. I just sat there frozen. I didn't know what to say. How do you defend yourself in that situation? 40 pairs of eyes were staring at me like I was terrible. Some students were actually glaring at me with disgust. Professor Johnson tried to calm things down and suggested we discuss it after class, but the damage was done. For the rest of the lecture, I could feel people staring and whispering about me. After class, I tried to explain myself to the deaf student privately. I apologized for hurting his feelings, even though that was never my intention. I told him I supported his accommodations and that I was just dealing with my own focus problems. But I could tell he didn't really believe me. The next few months were absolute hell. Word spread quickly around campus about what happened. People I barely knew would give me dirty looks in the hallways. Other students in the class would move away when I sat near them. Even some professors seemed to treat me differently, like they'd heard I was the student who bullied the disabled kid. I tried to explain my side to a few people, but nobody wanted to hear it. The story had already been decided. I was the ableist who wanted to banish the deaf student to the back of the classroom. My friend, the one who started all this, never corrected anyone or stood up for me. She just watched my reputation get destroyed. I ended up having to apologize publicly to the deaf student in front of the class just to try to salvage what was left of my college experience. It was humiliating, but I did it because I genuinely felt bad that my private comment had hurt someone, even though it was never meant to. The semester finally ended and I thought I could move on. But the reputation followed me. I had to switch to different classes and avoid certain parts of campus where people knew me as that ableist girl. Then yesterday, completely out of nowhere, I got a text from my former friend. She said she'd been thinking about what happened last semester and regretted how she handled the situation with the deaf student. She wanted to make it up to me somehow. I stared at my phone. After months of letting me suffer, now she wanted to make it up to me. I asked her if she was serious. She told me she knew she should have talked to me first before telling him. She said she thought she was doing the right thing because people like him deserve to know how others really feel about them. I told her she had completely twisted what I said and ruined my reputation. I said she made me look like a monster when all I did was vent about my own focus issues. She said she understood I was upset, but really thought we could work through this. I told her to go screw herself. She said that was really immature, that she was trying to apologize, and I was being nasty. She claimed I still hadn't emotionally grown at all. She destroys my college experience, lets me suffer for months, and then calls me immature for being angry about it. I never got any real resolution. The deaf student and I never had a proper conversation about what really happened. My reputation never recovered, and my former friend got to walk away without facing any problems for stirring up the drama in the first place. Maybe I was harsh in telling her to screw herself, but after what she put me through, I think she deserved it. I needed money for college, so I got a job at a 24-hour convenience store downtown. The store closes at midnight on weekdays, so I walk home around 12:30 a.m. I've been doing this routine for almost 2 years now, and I know every street and every safe spot to cross. That Tuesday night started like any other. I finished counting the register, locked up the store, and began my usual 20-minute walk home. The streets were empty except for the occasional car passing by. I had my earbuds in, listening to a podcast about true crime stories. I was walking along the sidewalk on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from my apartment. The sidewalk here is wide and well lit by street lamps. I stayed close to the building side, away from the curb. The street was quiet with only a few parked cars lining the curb. That's when I heard the engine revving loudly behind me. I turned around and saw headlights swerving back and forth. The car was moving way too fast and seemed to be having trouble staying in its lane. I quickly stepped even further away from the curb, pressing myself closer to the storefront windows, but the car suddenly jumped the curb. I remember the headlights getting brighter and brighter. I tried to dive to the side, but there wasn't enough time. The front bumper caught my legs and sent me flying into a parked car. The impact knocked the wind out of me and I hit the ground hard. My left leg was screaming in pain and I could taste blood in my mouth. I was lying there, dazed and trying to figure out what just happened when I heard a car door slam. Heavy footsteps approached me quickly. I looked up and saw a middle-aged woman with disheveled hair stumbling toward me. Even from where I was lying, I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Karen started screaming at me about what I had done to her car. She called me a stupid idiot and acted like the whole thing was my fault. I was the one lying on the ground, bleeding, and she was yelling at me. I tried to tell her that she had hit me and that I was on the sidewalk when it happened, but Karen wouldn't listen. She accused me of jumping in front of her car on purpose. She said I was trying to run an insurance scam and that it wasn't going to work. She was swaying as she stood over me, clearly drunk. Her car's front bumper was dented and the headlight was cracked. But instead of checking if I was okay or calling for help, she kept screaming about her precious car. Karen went on and on about how much the damage was going to cost her. She said she had just gotten the car detailed yesterday and acted like that was the most important thing in the world. I begged her to call an ambulance because I thought my leg was broken, but Karen just got more angry. She said I should be the one paying for her damages instead of asking for help. That's when she did something I'll never forget. She actually kicked me. While I was lying there, injured and bleeding, this woman kicked me in the ribs with her high heel. Karen screamed that everything was my fault and that I had ruined her life. She said she had a court date next week and now she had to deal with this too. I tried to protect myself, but I could barely move. She raised her foot to kick me again when I heard someone shouting. Thank God for that person. A man who'd been walking his dog had seen the whole thing. He ran over and got between me and Karen. The man yelled at Karen and asked what the hell she thought she was doing. He told her to get away from me. Karen told him to mind his own business and insisted that I had caused the accident. The dog walker said he had seen everything. He told Karen that she had driven right up on the sidewalk and hit me. He said he was calling the police right away. He warned Karen not to touch me again. More people started gathering. A woman from the apartment building across the street came out and knelt down beside me. She asked if I was okay and told me not to try to move. She said they were getting help. Karen was still ranting and raving, but now she had an audience. She kept insisting it was my fault, that I had jumped in front of her car intentionally. The smell of alcohol was so strong that even the bystanders started commenting on it. Another witness pointed out that Karen was clearly drunk and shouldn't even be driving. Karen got defensive and said she wasn't drunk. She claimed she had only had 2 glasses of wine with dinner and nothing more. The dog walker pointed out that it was 12:30 in the morning and asked what dinner she was talking about. The police arrived within minutes. 2 patrol cars and an ambulance showed up almost at the same time. The paramedics started checking me over while the officers began separating everyone to get statements. One of the officers told Karen to step away from me and come talk to him. Karen called me a scammer instead of a victim. She insisted that I had jumped in front of her car and that the whole thing was my fault. The officer asked Karen if she had been drinking that night. Karen got angry and said it was none of his business. The second officer told her that it was their business. He said he could smell alcohol from where he was standing. He told Karen they would need her to take a breathalyzer test. Karen got all worked up about her rights. She said they couldn't make her do anything. While Karen was arguing with the police, the paramedics were working on me. My left leg was definitely broken, and I had several cuts and bruises. They gave me something for the pain and got me ready for transport. One of the paramedics said they needed to get me to the hospital right away. He told me that my leg needed immediate attention. When they were loading me into the ambulance, I could see Karen getting more and more agitated with the police. The witnesses were all giving their statements, and it was clear that everyone had seen her drive onto the sidewalk and hit me. The dog walker told the officer that he was right there when it happened. He explained how Karen drove straight up onto the curb and hit me. Then he described how she got out and started yelling at me like it was my fault. He made sure to mention that she actually kicked me while I was down. The woman from across the street told the police that she lived right there and heard the crash. She said she looked out her window and saw Karen driving back and forth before she hit the curb. The last thing I saw before the ambulance doors closed was Karen in handcuffs, still screaming about how unfair everything was. At the hospital, they confirmed that my left leg was broken in 2 places. I also had 3 cracked ribs from where she kicked me, a concussion, and various cuts and bruises. I had to have surgery to put pins in my leg and spent 4 days in the hospital. My parents drove up from their hometown when they heard. My mom cried when she saw me, and my dad was furious. They wanted to press charges for everything, but the police told us Karen was already facing serious trouble. The officer explained that Karen had failed the breathalyzer test badly. Her blood alcohol was twice the legal limit. He said they had multiple witnesses who saw her assault me after the accident. Karen was looking at drunk driving, vehicular assault, hit and run, and regular assault charges. 2 weeks later, when I was at home recovering, my lawyer called with an update. My lawyer told me something unbelievable. Karen had actually tried to countersue me for damages to her car. I asked if he was serious. He said he was dead serious. Karen's lawyer had actually filed paperwork claiming I intentionally jumped in front of her car to commit insurance fraud. But then he told me the good news. The security camera from the store across the street had caught the whole thing. There was crystal clear footage of her swerving onto the sidewalk and hitting me, then getting out and attacking me. I asked what would happen now. My lawyer explained that Karen's case got thrown out right away. He said the judge actually laughed when he saw the footage. With her previous drunk driving conviction from 3 years ago, she was looking at serious jail time. Karen ended up pleading guilty to avoid a trial. She got 18 months in jail, lost her license for 5 years, and had to pay for all my medical bills plus damages. Her insurance company dropped her, and she had to sell her precious car to pay the legal fees. This happened when I was 19, and everything in my life felt upside down. I'd gotten married young to someone who came from money, and honestly, most people thought I'd married way above my station. My husband had a good job, and we lived in this beautiful house that most people my age could only dream of, while my old classmates were either finishing high school or starting college. I was married and pregnant, which made me some kind of social pariah. I was incredibly lonely. Most married people with kids were at least 10 years older than me, and people my age acted like I had some contagious disease. I was desperate for friends, which probably made me an easy target for the wrong kind of people. That's how I ended up becoming friends with this girl who was still finishing her senior year at my old high school. She'd been a freshman when I was a junior, and we had some mutual friends, so it seemed natural enough. She started coming over regularly, and I was just grateful to have someone to talk to who wasn't my husband or my doctor. One evening, she asked if she could bring a friend over for dinner. I was excited to meet someone new and said yes immediately. The friend seemed nice enough, though she was pretty quiet during dinner. At one point, she asked to use the restroom. I told her it was just around the corner, down the hall where she couldn't miss it. She nodded and disappeared around the corner. A few minutes later, she came back and rejoined the conversation like nothing had happened. They left after a couple more hours of hanging out, and I thought it had been a really nice evening. About a week later, I was getting ready for a dinner out with my husband and went to put on my wedding earrings. These weren't just any earrings. They were part of a pearl and diamond set my husband had given me as a wedding gift. I wore them on special occasions, and they meant everything to me. They weren't in my jewelry box. I tore through every drawer, every surface, every possible place I could have left them. My husband helped me search for hours. My husband reassured me that I'd probably just set them down somewhere and forgotten, and that they'd turn up eventually. But I knew exactly where I'd last had them, right in my jewelry box in our bedroom. We hadn't done any major cleaning or moving around, so they should have been there. Still, I tried to convince myself he was right. A few weeks passed, and I was checking our accounts online when I nearly had a heart attack. One of our checking accounts was almost $1,000 in the negative. This was an account we'd set up for my husband's potential side business, so we didn't keep much money in it or monitor it closely. I called my husband immediately and told him something was wrong with the business account because we were almost $1,000 in the hole. He said that was impossible since neither of us had been using that card. We logged in together and started going through the charges. Every single purchase was at stores in our local mall, places like clothing stores, makeup shops, accessory stores, the kind of places teenage girls spend their allowances. There were dozens of small purchases, each one followed by a $25 overdraft fee once they'd spent the small balance we kept in the account. The timeline made my stomach drop. All the purchases had happened within a few days of that dinner party. We kept that debit card in our master bedroom, in a drawer of our dresser, the same bedroom where I kept my jewelry box, the same bedroom that someone would have walked past on their way to steal my wedding earrings. I was beyond angry. This girl had sat at my dinner table, eaten food I'd cooked, accepted my friendship and hospitality, and then robbed me blind. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I started calling every store at the mall, asking about security cameras. Most didn't have them, but one store had just installed a new system because of shoplifting problems. The store manager told me they had footage from that day, but they couldn't give it to me directly. If I filed a police report, they said they'd gladly hand it over to the police. Next, I called my bank about disputing the charges. The bank representative explained that I could file fraud claims, but there was a time limit. If I didn't file within the deadline, I'd be responsible for all charges including overdraft fees. They'd need to do an investigation. I did some research on theft laws in my state. Anything over $2,000 was automatically a felony. My earrings were worth about $800. The bank charges plus overdraft fees totaled around $1,000. We were definitely in felony territory. Time to set my trap. I called my so-called friend with devastating news. I told her something terrible had happened and that someone who was at our house had stolen from us. She acted shocked and asked what I meant. I explained that my pearl earrings from my wedding were missing and someone had stolen our debit card from our bedroom and racked up charges at the mall. She said that was awful and claimed she couldn't believe someone would do that. I told her I knew and that we were going to press felony charges since it was over $2,000 between the jewelry and all the bank fees. She quickly responded that she didn't think I'd be able to prove anything. She confidently said that the stores at the mall didn't have security cameras, so there was no way to prove who used my card. Bingo. She just told me exactly how she knew there were no cameras, except she was wrong about one store. I corrected her, explaining that wasn't actually true. I told her one of the stores had just installed cameras, and they were ready to turn the footage over to police once I filed the report. The line went dead quiet for several seconds. She stammered that she had to go and hung up abruptly. She called back 30 minutes later asking if she could come over because she needed to talk to me. She showed up at my door within the half hour, and she wasn't empty-handed. She had my pearl earrings, the debit card, and even a small diamond ring that had belonged to my great-aunt, something I didn't even realize was missing because I never wore it. She said she needed to explain what really happened. I told her I was listening. She insisted she hadn't stolen anything from me. She claimed her friend had done it. She explained that when her friend went to use my bathroom, she'd actually gone upstairs and taken my jewelry and debit card. She said she had no idea until later. I pointed out that she'd known about it and said nothing, and that she'd even participated in spending the money. She started crying then, real tears streaming down her face. She claimed she was in a difficult position and didn't want to betray her friend. She admitted that when her friend told her what she'd done, she was already involved because her friend had already given her some of the stolen money to buy things. I asked her if I didn't qualify as someone worth protecting since she was happy to spend money stolen from me. She insisted it wasn't like that and revealed there were 4 of them who went shopping that day. She claimed she couldn't stop it once it started. The crying got harder, but I felt nothing. This girl had watched me tear my house apart looking for my wedding earrings. She'd sat there while I worried about my bank account. She'd participated in a shopping spree funded by my stolen money. I told her exactly what was going to happen. She was going to give me the names and parents' contact information for everyone involved. If she didn't, I was going to the police right then. She protested that 2 of them were only 17 and this could ruin their lives. I told her she should have thought about that before they all decided to rob me. She gave me everything I asked for: 4 names, 4 sets of parents' phone numbers. I called each parent personally. I explained that I was calling about their daughter and some theft that occurred at my home. I told them she and 3 friends had stolen jewelry and a debit card from my bedroom and spent nearly $1,000 at the mall. I explained I was offering them a chance to pay back every penny before I filed fraud charges with my bank and pressed felony charges with the police. Every parent was horrified. Every single one thanked me for giving their child a chance to make it right, instead of just going straight to the police. I gave them 1 week to pay back the full amount, every charge plus every overdraft fee. I made it clear this was non-negotiable and that my bank had a deadline for filing fraud claims. Over the next few days, Karen tried calling me several times to negotiate. She complained that the amount seemed really high and asked if I was sure that's what they actually spent. I explained that every time they used that card after the account was empty, it generated a $25 overdraft fee. I told her their little shopping spree had cost about 4 times what it would have if they'd used their own money. She then asked if they could have more time because it was really hard to get that much money together so fast. I asked her why I should trust any of them or take any risk after what they'd done to me. That shut her up quickly. Within the week, I had every penny back. All 4 of them had to get jobs and work constantly to pay their share. I heard from mutual friends that they were absolutely miserable, working retail jobs and fast food just to pay me back before the deadline. Karen and her friends had to work constantly to pay me back. Their parents made them take responsibility for every dollar. No family bailouts, no loans from mom and dad. They had to earn it all themselves, and they had to do it fast. I worked at a medium-sized company with an information technology department of about 20 people. We were organized into specialized teams with 2 people covering each area. There was the server and database team, the application development team, and my specialty: network, infrastructure, and firewall management. My partner and I handled all the network equipment, internet connections, and security systems that kept the company running. Systems don't just break during business hours. Servers crash at midnight, internet connections fail on weekends, and security breaches happen on holidays. That's why most companies have on-call rotations where someone is always available to handle emergencies. Our company had what they called a gentleman's agreement with the information technology staff. Since the law in our country prevented them from forcing anyone to be available around the clock, they offered us a deal. Anyone who volunteered for the on-call rotation would get an extra €500 per month. In exchange, we'd carry company phones and respond to emergencies outside business hours. The rules were pretty relaxed though. You had reasonable time to call back, and you weren't expected to start working immediately unless it was truly critical. The money was decent because emergencies weren't that common. Each team might get called 2 or 3 times per year for real problems. Most of the time, the €500 was free money for the psychological burden of knowing you might get a work call during dinner or on vacation. When I first started at the company, I wasn't included in this agreement. My direct boss said I needed time to learn the systems before taking on that responsibility, which made sense. I was fine with it initially since I wouldn't have been much help anyway. After 2 years, I knew those systems inside and out. I could troubleshoot network problems in my sleep and had the firewall configurations memorized. That's when things got problematic. My higher-up boss, let's call him the department head, started making comments that rubbed me the wrong way. During team meetings when discussing coverage for vacations or sick days, he'd point at me and tell my colleagues and direct boss that if there was a network problem while my partner was out, they'd just call me instead. He said this like it was the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't getting the monthly payment, but suddenly I was expected to be available anyway. The unfairness of it burned me up inside, but I didn't say anything at first. I figured maybe he'd eventually add me to the official agreement. Months passed, and nothing changed. I watched my colleagues collect their extra money while being told I was the backup plan whenever one of them wasn't available. My direct boss seemed uncomfortable with the situation too, but he wasn't willing to challenge the department head about it. The breaking point came during a major system outage that affected multiple departments. It was a complex problem that required all hands on deck, including people not normally on call. The department head needed everyone's help, but instead of calling me himself, he got one of my colleagues to do it. My colleague called and explained that the department head wanted everyone to come in because there was a major outage affecting the whole company. I told him I wasn't on the on-call agreement and didn't get paid to be available after hours. He tried to convince me that they really needed my help with this one, but I reminded him that maybe the department head should have included me in the agreement like everyone else. It was hard hanging up on a colleague who was just following orders, but I was tired of being taken advantage of. That incident made it clear that the department head expected all the benefits of having me on call without any of the compensation or official recognition. I decided to solve this problem permanently. If they didn't want me officially on call, then they wouldn't be able to call me at all. I went to the phone company and got a completely new mobile number. The only person I gave it to was my direct partner, who agreed the whole situation was unfair. When asked, he'd simply say he didn't have my new number either. Next, I disconnected my home landline, which I barely used anyway. I gave human resources my parents' phone number and told them this was for absolute emergencies only. I explained that if someone was injured or the building was on fire, they could reach me through my parents, but for anything work-related, they should wait until Monday. My direct boss knew what I was doing and didn't try to stop me. Even some of my colleagues thought the department head was being unreasonable. Everyone understood why I was angry about the situation. Then I waited for the inevitable test of my new system. It came on a beautiful Saturday morning. I was enjoying a relaxing weekend, completely unreachable by work. I had no idea that chaos was unfolding at the office. Monday morning arrived and I walked into the office to find everyone looking frazzled and exhausted. The usual Monday morning chatter was replaced by tired grumbling and complaints about working through the weekend. One of my colleagues told me that everything had crashed on Saturday night. They'd been at the office since Sunday morning trying to fix it. When I asked what happened, he explained that the main firewall started having network interface problems. The connection kept going up and down every few minutes, and none of them could log into it. My stomach dropped a little. The firewall was my specialty, and only my partner and I had administrative access to it. My partner was somewhere in Spain, on vacation, completely unreachable. The colleague went on to tell me they had to call the vendor's emergency support. It took the support team until Sunday evening to fix the problem, and they charged weekend rates the whole time. The company's critical batch processing jobs, which normally ran over the weekend, had failed completely. These jobs handled payroll calculations, inventory updates, and financial reporting. The delays were going to cause problems for multiple departments throughout the week. Within an hour of arriving, I got summoned to my direct boss's office. He looked tired and stressed but not angry at me. He told me he needed to put me on the on-call rotation immediately. When I asked about the department head's decision to exclude me, he said the department head would handle all the paperwork with human resources. He just needed my commitment that I'd be reachable when I left that day. I asked about the monthly compensation, and he confirmed it would be backdated to that day. 500 euros per month, same as everyone else. I gave him my new phone number and watched him add it to the emergency contact list. Within a week, human resources had processed all the paperwork. I received my first on-call payment with the next month's salary, and nobody ever questioned my inclusion again. Many people in the company resented our free money for being on call, thinking we never actually had to do anything for it. I was always honest about my feelings on the arrangement. Whenever someone from accounting or management complained that it must be nice getting that extra money for doing nothing, I'd tell them honestly that I'd give up the money tomorrow if it meant having my personal time back. I'd explain that having work hanging over your head every day wasn't worth it. Most of my colleagues thought I was crazy for saying that, but I meant it. The constant awareness that you might get a work call during dinner, family time, or vacation created a mental burden that money couldn't really compensate for. A few years later, I found a new job with a company that had a strict 9 to 5 policy. No after-hours calls, no weekend emergencies, no carrying work phones home. The salary was comparable even without the on-call bonus, and my quality of life improved dramatically. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.